Welcome to our podcast on Chayei, the deep dive by the Holy Alshech. And in this week's episode, the Alshech wants to demonstrate to us the inextricable connection between the souls of Chava, Sarah, and Rivka. And he does that by asking 6 main questions on the first 2 Pesukim of the Parasha. And these are the questions. Firstly, why is the word Vayiyu when describing the years of Sarah? Secondly, why is the repetition? We hear she's 100 years, then 20 years, then 27. Why not 127 years? And at the end of that phrase, there's an additional 2 words, Chayei Sarah, again repeated. Why? Then we're told that Abraham came to eulogize Sarah. And it's worded in a very strange way. He came to eulogize le Sarah, to Sarah. But it's normally et Sarah, about Sarah. Then we learn that she died in Kiryat Arba, which is in Hebron, which is in Eretz Israel. All this we know already. Why the repetition? And finally, we have the idea that Avram came to eulogize her, and then to cry for her. And normally, in human nature, we cry first, and then we eulogize. And before answering these questions, the Alshech brings out a beautiful Kabbalistic idea, which I found fascinating. Here it is. He says that the souls of Avram and Sarah came to the world to rectify the sin of Adam and Chava. And he quotes the Midrash with a beautiful question, saying that if that's the case, if Avram really came to fix the damage that Adam had created, why didn't God create Avram first? And the answer is quite mind-boggling. He says that if Abraham was created first, who would come to rectify Abraham if he made a mistake at the beginning? Because we all have free will. And so this demonstrates that it's only the soul of Abraham that is powerful enough to rectify the sin of Adam, who was created by Hashem himself. And we learn later on that it's not just Abraham, but Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that fixed that, that rectified that. And from the female side, it's Sarah and Rivka, and all women till today, whose goal is to rectify the sin of Chava. And the next thing we learn from the Alshech is that he contrasts the life of Adam and Chava with that of Avram and Sarah, and shows the difference. He shows that Adam and Chava brought in death to the world, Avram and Sarah brought in life to the world. Adam and Chava brought curses to the world, Avram and Chava and Sarah brought in blessings, as it says, and you will be blessed, and the world will be blessed by you. Adam and Chava, as a result of their sin, the Shekhinah was removed from the world by one layer to a higher level of the heavens, and Abraham and Sarah brought back down the Shekhinah towards the earth from the 7th to the 6th level. We learned that Adam and Chava ate and brought death to the world, and Avram and Sarah eat and encourage others to do Birkat Hamazon and Chesed and Achnasat Ochim, and through that bring life to the world. As we learned that the whole of the world stands on one basic midah of Chesed, Gemilut Chasedim, and that is the mitzvah that Avram and Sarah really excelled in. The main thing is that Chava succumbed to the temptation of the snake and was impregnated by a spiritually impure impurity. And Sarah, in contrast, resisted the advances of twice of Pharaoh and Abimelech in when she was abducted, and neither was able to defile her. And it's the Alshech brings a beautiful question. He says, why did God put Sarah in such a dangerous position of almost being defiled? And the answer the Alshech gives is very powerful. It says that in that way, she was able to rise above the challenge and thereby rectifying the sin of Chava, which has major implications on how we look at challenges that we're faced in the world. So the Alshech says that in addition to this, there are 3 specific mitzvot that Sarah performed that were, again, rectification for Chava. And these were the mitzvah of Nida, separating from the husband during a menstrual cycle, Chala, separating a portion of the Chala and giving it over to God before eating the bread, and the mitzvah of lighting the candles for Shabbat, because we learned that man's soul is the flame of Hashem, and by lighting the candles, Sarah is bringing back the light that was lost and diminished as a result of bringing death to the world. And Rivka herself was the person that actually took over this role from Sarah, as we will discuss in a few minutes. But what is the proof that Sarah partially rectified these sins of Chava? And the Alshech brings a beautiful connection between these mitzvot and the sins. The Nida is about blood, and that was the rectification of that was shown by the clouds hovering around the tent. And the Alshech brings the connection between these two because both are in the Hebrew is spoken by Petach Nida and Petach Ohel. Secondly, the challah. We know that through the midrash that the bread that Sarah baked every week stayed fresh for the whole week until the next Shabbat. And finally, the mitzvah of lighting the candles. We know that from the midrash, that her candles of Friday night lasted till the next Friday night, next Shabbat. And so there we have a beautiful summation of that. The Alshech says that there are 3 possible reasons that Avram came to eulogize Sarah, and these 3 reasons are as follows. She came to rectify the sin of Chava, and her death curtailed that. And to that, the Alshech says, no, because we had learned just before the learning of the death of Sarah, we learned in last week's Parasha, at the end, that Rivka, her prodigy, was born. And so that's not the reason for the eulogy. The second possible reason is that her life was curtailed. We learned fascinatingly that in the previous parasha, where Sarah was arguing with Avram about about Hagar, Sarah says to Avram a very cursed phrase: "May let Hashem be the judge between me, Sarah, and you, Avram, and decide who's correct." And the Gemara of Rosh Hashanah takes this to task and says, as a result of that statement, Sarah lost 33 years of her life, which is incredible. So just watch out what you say. But you would have thought that, if she didn't fulfill all her life, then surely that's a reason for you to eulogize her. But no, we learned that Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, and Chayei Sarah is repeated at the end to show us that even with the curtailed number of years, 127, Sarah perfected her role of what she needed to achieve her mission in life within. She didn't need the full spectrum of her 160 years in order to do that. And the third reason the Alshech gives is his personal loss, Avram's personal loss, because we learn, the sages say, that a man who loses his first wife is like experiencing the loss of the Bet HaMikdash in your lifetime, in one's lifetime. And we learn counter to that the Avot, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all three of them possessed the presence of the Shekhinah with them. They were a Merkava to Hashem. And therefore, from his perspective, Avram, he still had the presence of God with him, and it wasn't like he lost the Beit HaMikdash at the death of Sarah. So that leaves us with a question, well, why did he eulogize her? As is written, and the answer, incredibly, is in the words Kiryat Arba, Shizebek Hebron. And the Alshech says another meaning of Hebron, using the same letters, is Chibur, which means a connection. And he states that the Makpelah, which was in Kiryat Arba, the burial plot for Adam and Chava, and later on Sarah, this plot was the connection between the physical world and the heavens. And in fact, that the Makpelah was like a gateway to Gan Eden. And the fact that Sarah specifically died there was an indication to us of how righteous this woman was, that she went straight to Gan Eden. And so Avram came to eulogize her name, her essence, what she had accomplished. Because we're told that when a tzaddik passes away, we should eulogize it. So to discuss this, I'm delighted to invite to our live Zoom on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Reva Emunah Seidel, a great teacher here in Tzfat with a lovely following, and we're going to be discussing who Sarah really was and what did she bring to the world, and how every woman today, every Jewish woman today, continues the work of Sarah of rectifying the sin of Chava. So I just want to leave you with this final idea, and that is that the Alshech brings that there's 4 elements to a human. The first is the guf, the body. The second is the neshama, the first level of the soul. The third is the ruach, which is the middle level of the soul. And the fourth is the neshama, which is the highest level of the soul. And we learned that the Alshech tells us that the Chava damage in eating from the tree of the good the tree of good and bad, knowledge of good and bad, she damaged the first 3 levels, the body, the nefesh, and the ruach. And he connects He connects the 3 mitzvot of that Sarah brought to the world parallel to those 3 items that were damaged. Firstly, the chala, the separating of the chala is obviously a fixing of the body, because they're both made of chomer, of dough. Secondly, the whole mitzvah of nida is to fix the nefesh. How do we know that? Because we know that the seat of the nefesh is the blood, as it said, ki dam hu nefesh. And then the third thing, the ruach, we know that relates to the lighting of the candles. And so by doing these 3 mitzvot, we rectified 3 levels of the human. And we asked the question, what about the neshama? Wasn't that damaged? And we learned from that the neshama actually removed itself from the human just before sin happens, and then comes back in afterwards. And what's interesting, that if we go into the end of the parasha, we have this story of Yitzchak bringing his wife Rivka into the tent of Sarai, his mother, and he's consoled by it. And this is the way in which Yitzchak tests Rivka to see if she can continue the incredible, exceptional mitzvot of his mother. Because after all, Rivka's father and her brother, Lavan, were idol worshippers, and Isaac wanted to make sure that she was worthy of becoming his wife. And that's why the wording says, it's a beautiful wording, he brought her to the tent, he married her, she became his wife, and he loved her, and then he was consoled after the death of his mother. So there you have it, the first mention of love in the Torah, and we see that the love comes after the marriage, because it was only there that Yitzchak really understood that Rivka's midot, her characters, were in her own element able to continue the work of Sarah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Do join us on Tuesday at 7 o'clock for a live interview with Reva Emunah Seidel. And I want to leave you with a blessing for a wonderful week. May you be successful in everything you do, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.